we got CDC is 12 billion, you know, they don't spend it very well, but, you know, I'm going to change that. Anyway, when Mitch McConnell asked that month, March of 2022, can we really afford to send $113 billion to Ukraine? He said, don't worry, because it's not really going to Ukraine. It's going to US military contractors. The General Dynamics, to Raytheon, to Boeing and Lockheed. So it's really just coming back for us. He acknowledged that it was a money laundering scheme for the military-industrial complex. Well, who do you think owns every one of those companies? Yeah, BlackRock. And I saw Tim Scott the other night on the Republican debate, where, you know, they were all talking. Vivek was questioning the war. He's the only one there that was questioning. All the other ones were saying, no, this is great, and then after we do this, we're going to go to war on Mexico, and then we're going to go to war on China. And Tim Scott said, he said, you don't understand. It's not a gift. We're not giving it to Ukraine. It's a loan. They got to pay it back. Oh, how many of you think any part of that is going to be paid back? Nobody. You're right. It's not. So why do we call it a loan? When everybody knows it's not ever intended to be paid back. We call it a loan because when you call it a loan, you can impose conditions on the person that you loan it to. So they impose, the aid package is filled with conditions, very onerous, burdensome conditions. A lot of them have to do with an austerity program in Ukraine to make sure no poor people in Ukraine get any money at all. And that the education systems and everything else is bankrupted. But also, it requires Ukrainian government to sell its assets. So if Ukrainian government owns ports or roads or airports or whatever, it's now going to sell those to big corporations, multinational corporations. The most important thing is it requires Ukraine to sell its farmland. So Ukraine's farmland is the richest farmland in the world. It is the breadbasket of Europe. There's been 1,000 years of wars fought over that farmland. It said, people joke that if you throw food on the ground in Ukraine, something will grow that you can eat because it's so fertile. So everybody wants that farmland. And now, since the beginning of the war, 30% of it has been sold. Most of it to Cargill, DuPont, and Monsanto. And who do you think owns all of those companies? BlackRock, right? So Cargill is privately owned, but there is one other stakeholder, which is a major stakeholder, which is BlackRock. The rest of them are, it's the major owner, BlackRock and Vanguard, which own each other, are the owners. So like I said, they're doing it right in front of us. The CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, is on the board of the World Economic Forum. And they, when they gather, as you know, they gather in Davos, that they call the Billionaires Boys Club, gathers in Davos once a year to plan what the world will look like for the rest of humanity. And they call that vision the Great Reset. And when he was asked, what does the Great Reset really mean for us? And Klaus Schwab, who's the director of World Economic Forum, said, it means that you will own nothing and you will be happy. So they're on their way to do at least the first part of that. They're going to own everything, and we're going to become renters, we're going to become borrowers, they're going to commoditize humanity, we're going to become serfs on our own land. And, when they had the debate the other night, nobody was talking about these things. What they talk about is the issues that divide us all. The issues of, you know, and there are important issues of guns, of abortion, of trans rights, of immigration or whatever, but they're all very, you know, they're culture war issues that keep us all at each other's throats. And at we know, you know, unsolvable in the political process is just a constant conflict. And at least the conventional political process. So and none of them are talking about what's really happening in our country, the level of desperation, the disintegration, these rises in suicides and alcoholism and addiction that are debilitating our community. The only solution they have, the fentanyl crisis, is we're going to go to war with Mexico. So it's all things about conflict that escalate the conflicts between blacks and whites and Republicans and Democrats and natives and immigrants in this country, and we're all at each other's throats all the time, and it's all being exasperated by our political leadership. And you know, when the king and queen look over the balustrades of their castle and they see all of their subjects fighting each other, they go back to the big feast and they pop champagne corks because they know nobody's going to come over the wall for them. And what I'm trying to do with this campaign is to get us to stop fighting each other so we can go over that wall. I'm going to talk really briefly about one of my programs, and I'm going to let you ask questions. But, you know, we kicked off the great prosperity in this country with that 50-year period with a housing boom. And when I go back into office, I'm going to do everything I can to initiate a new housing boom. And one of the things I'm going to do is create a new class of mortgages that are available to single-family home buyers for 3% interest. And I'm going to do that without driving up the debt, which we need to stop doing. I'm going to do it by, you know that if you have a rich uncle and he'll go sign your mortgage for you, that you can get a much better rate because the bank is basing their interest rates to you not on your lousy credit rating, but on your uncle's superb credit rating. So I'm going to give everybody a rich uncle, which is Uncle Sam. I'm going to get Uncle Sam to co-sign the mortgage. If you default, the house goes to Uncle Sam, and it's, you know, and no foul. And you know, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae did that, and they ended up with a lot of houses, and now they have $110 billion surplus that's sitting in a bank, which I'm also going to use to get people into homes. And I'm going to finance it by selling T-bills at 3%, zero interest to finance this program. So the market will finance it rather than the taxpayer. And I'm going to give the first $500,000 of these to teachers because that's the most important profession. And we need to start supporting them because we need to focus on our schools and making sure that they have homes nearby and that they're you know, they're part of communities and that we're all working together to build communities. So I'm going to I want to look. I know how to unravel what's happening on Capitol Hill. How can I say that? I've spent 40 years suing the corporations that now own our government and suing the regulatory agencies. I've sued almost all the regulatory agencies, DOT, and you know, I'm now effectively in litigation with them, with the USDA on multiple occasions, which is supposed to help family farmers and give us nutritious food and does the opposite. I've sued EPA more times than I can count, NIH, CDC, FDA. I just won. And when you sue these agencies, You get a PhD in how to unravel the corruption. It makes you understand, how did this happen? Why are these people acting the way they're doing? The opposite of what they're supposed to be doing. I know all of you have had questions about government policies that make no sense. And then, if you see them up close, you understand how it happens. A lot of it is perverse incentives. A lot of it is just personnel who should not be running. When I sued Monsanto, in the discovery process, we uncovered emails, years and years of emails between the director of the pesticide division at EPA, a man named Jess Rowland. I always like to repeat his name because I don't think he should sleep easy. And the heads of Monsanto. And it turns out we were paying him for all these decades, but he was actually secretly working for Monsanto, and they were telling him, you got to kill this study, you got to falsify science here. They were doing everything they could because they knew a Roundup caused cancer. And they were just trying to keep that science off the books. And at one point they said to him, we need you to kill a study that's being done by an entirely different agency, ATSDR. And he said to them, well, that's not even my agency. I don't have any supervision, but I'm going to kill it. And you have to give me a gold medal when I do that. So, unfortunately, Jess Rowland is the template. He is not the exception. He's the rule. There are people like that in almost all of the agencies. And I know their names in many cases, and I understand how they act. And I'm going to move them out very, very quickly and put it I can do this, but I can't do it on my own. I said in my announcement speech that if you give me a sword and some ground to stand on, I'll take your country back for you. But I need your help. I need you, number one, go to Kennedy24.com, volunteer, send $5 if you can. If you can't do that, volunteer. Whatever you do, spread the word, wear a Kennedy t-shirt, wear a Kennedy hat, put a bumper sticker, put a lawn sign up, get people talking about it. We did a poll recently in Michigan, and there's a lot of people who don't know that I'm running. So the more, I know it's crazy. I know I had to fire half the people who worked for me. Just kidding. But we need to spread the word. So get out there and we'll see you all on the barricades. And thank you very, very much for your support.
Chronic pain patients have been a good long decade now, just for needing the medicine that makes them feel they could get through the day. How will you help chronic pain patients out?
Yeah, I mean, I can't, I'd like to hear from you what you think I should be doing. And how we, because I think one of the honest dilemmas that FDA had was how do you make drugs available, particularly opiates, to chronic pain patients without making it, without starting a nationwide epidemic of opiates. So I would love, and Stephanie will, if you have ideas about how to thread that needle, I would love to hear them, because I think that is one of the genuine dilemmas that, we have to figure out how to deal with that. If you write your information, if you have an idea about that, about how to solve that, I'd like to hear it. And if you can contact us, or give her your information, and we'll contact you and talk to you about it. Thanks.
Yes, I'm at St. Francis about alternative care for medical and health issues, getting being able to go to a doctor when you really need to go to a doctor and feeling like you can trust them to do what you want done instead of what their system says to be done. And along with that, getting insurance companies and Medicare to pay for alternate care that might help you.
I mean, it's not just that it's not covered. There's an active war on natural health, and I'm going to change that. I know I can change that, and I'm going to, my first week in office, I'm going to go down to NIH, and I'm going to get all the employees, and I'm going to just say, and I'm going to say some nice things to them about government service, et cetera, but I'm also just going to say, you know, they have a $42 billion budget that they distribute to 56,000 scientists, and what do those scientists do? They do mainly two things. They study infectious disease and how to make new ones, which is crazy. And I mean, how insane is that they're doing that still? And then the other thing they do is they develop, they incubate drugs for the pharmaceutical companies to treat the chronic disease epidemic that they helped start. So we had, when my uncle was president, 6% of the country had chronic disease. By 1986, 11.8% had chronic disease. By 2006, 54%. And we don't know how many today because NIH stopped publishing that data. A study came out that said about 2 weeks ago, that 1 out of every 7 kids now has autoimmune disease. That's not normal. We have the highest chronic disease burden in the world. And we know it's coming from an environmental toxin, or, you know, a lot of them. Because genes don't cause epidemics. They may provide a vulnerability, but you need an environmental toxin. And we're the sickest country in the world. We have the highest chronic disease burden, and we have, our kids are the sickest generation. You know, we've gone from just autism alone, 1 in 10,000, and my generation today, down 1 in 10,000 people. You're not going to see 69-year-old men walking around with a non-toilet trained, non-verbal, head-banging, stimming, toe walking. I've never seen it. Right? But, you know, 1 out of every 34 of our kids look like that. Something happened. And all the lies they say that, oh, we just didn't notice it before have been proven again and again to be baloney. Why aren't we asking that question? What is happening? Why did peanut allergies suddenly appear in 1989? Why did eczema appear suddenly in 1989 and go epidemic? And, you know, all these autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis, juvenile diabetes, Crohn's. Who ever heard of Crohn's disease? Our age? Nobody. Nobody. What about, or lupus? All of these suddenly appear, all of them around 1989. What happened? Okay, and why is nobody, those 56,000 scientists, why is nobody asking that most important question? And by the way, during COVID, we had the worst body count on earth.
Right.
I don't know why. We have 16% of the COVID deaths in our country. We only have 4.2% of the globe's population. Why are people getting awards for how they handled COVID? Right? We literally did worse than anybody on earth. So, the CDC says, well, the reason all these people died was not because of bad management, which definitely it was part of it, but they all have chronic disease. And they had the average person, this is according to CDC, the average American who died from COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases. So they had obesity, they had diabetes, they had asthma, and one other thing, right? That's the average. Some of them had 10.
Right.
So, and nobody else has that in the world. So what happened to our country? You know, and what you can say is, it wasn't COVID that was killing. It was chronic disease. It was bad health. And, you know, the COVID pushed them off the cliff. But it was the chronic disease that walked them up to the top of the mountain and put them right on the edge of the cliff where they could be pushed off. Now, why did we spend trillions and trillions on COVID and not a penny on finding out what that was? I'm going to change that.
Hello, Mr. Kennedy. I'm part of the exodus from California. My family grew up in California as farm workers, and my family was with your father, Delano, when he went to meet with Cesar Chavez to try and get him to eat again. So we also walked when we were boycotting lettuce, grapes, because the farm workers didn't even have any toilets or water or couldn't take any breaks. But anyway, with all that said, things have obviously changed. My three sons are still in California. One recently bought a home, a used home, nothing fantabulous, nothing custom, for $600,000. My other son and my daughter-in-law have great paying jobs. They can't afford to buy a home. So my question is, oh, and also, I spoke to my son this morning, and gasoline is $6. Gasoline is $6 a gallon.
Yeah, I paid $7.
Yeah. Yeah. So my question is, what do you plan to do with the inflation and as far as gas prices? Well,
first of all, thank you for sharing that story. And, you know, inflation, anybody who says they have an instantaneous solution for inflation is just not being realistic. What we've got to do is we've got to cut our costs so that we don't continue to add to it. And one of the ways to do that, I'm going to cut $500 billion from the military budget. That's not going to get us there completely, but there's a lot of other things. You can go to our website that I'm going to do. One of the things is, for 25 years, the GAO has done a report every year identifying the most wasteful programs in government, and some of this stuff is just insane that they do. I mean, it's crazy. And they're programs that just don't do anything but go on year after year. So they have that, and those big, thick studies go on a shelf, and that's it. They do it every year. So I'm going to do like a base closing commission that they had, you know, back and when we ran down the Cold War, and I'm going to get them to go through all of those studies and identify the worst of those programs, the ones that are the least politically volatile, that everybody can look at them and nobody's going to stand up and defend them. And then I'm going to put them all in one bill, send it to Congress, and ask for an up or down vote on all of them. And I think that is a way that everybody says they're going to eliminate waste, but this is actually something that I think will work. Oh, that's right. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to end the chronic disease epidemic. And that sounds like a lofty promise, but what I've said to people, if I get to year 4 of my presidency and I haven't dramatically dropped the level of chronic disease in this country, you shouldn't vote for me again. Oh, and we know there are environmental exposures, and people say, okay, here's a list of them, of the biggest culprits. PFOAs, which are flame retardants, which follow the timeline. You have to think of something that became ubiquitous to the American population around 1989, mid-90s, that affected every demographic from Cubans in Key Biscayne to Inuit in Alaska. And that, you know, for a long time, it affected the neurological illnesses that it caused: ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, Tourette syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, autism, and all the others. that there's a 4-to-1 ratio boys to girls. So what is a toxin? There are toxins that affect boys and not girls, and there are the opposite kind. So you can identify the toxin, and there's only a narrow list of exposures. PFOAs is one of those. Glyphosate is, another one, which is in Roundup, which became ubiquitous at that time. Atrazine, neonicotinoid pesticides, high fructose corn syrup, cell phone radiation, and there's a bunch of other ones. So, but it's a limited number, and it's a very easy thing to do those studies. And then you'll say, well, how do you get rid of some of these because they're popular products? And I'll tell you how you do it is you do enough science on it. And, once the science is there, like if high fructose corn syrup is causing the obesity epidemic or the diabetes epidemic, it's not a good thing. No matter how, powerful that industry is, we need to eliminate it. But the government and, my administration probably won't have the power to just banish it. But what you can do is you can do real science on it. And once you get 8, 10, 12, 15 studies, then the trial lawyers do it for you. That's what we did with Monsanto, not Roundup. But if you have enough science that they can sue and say, we went from 6% obese and 13% overweight when my uncle was president to 47% obese and 75% overweight today. It's not because Americans suddenly became lazy or kids became lazy. They're being poisoned. They're being mass poisoned. And, we need, when we find out the culprits, we're going to do the science on it, and we're going to let the law do the rest.
Hi, Mr. Kennedy. In 1992, the late great Ross Perot warned against NAFTA when both the Republican George Herbert Walker Bush and Bill Clinton came to this state and promised not one job would leave this state. Well, all our jobs left. And I want to know, what are you going to do to bring our jobs back home to Michigan? Because the giant sucking sound continues, and it cannot continue any longer.
Yeah, we were promised that globalization was going to help the American worker, and that was, I'm not sure it was a lie, but it was not. It's turned out for sure not to be true. And all I can say is, I lived at a time when the American worker made America the greatest nation on earth, and that's not just hyperbole. By all these different metrics, we were the moral authority everybody looked to. We had the leadership in the world. We had the wealthiest population, the largest middle class. I know what that looks like, and everything I do when we renegotiate these treaties, everything I do is going to be about restoring that, the American worker to primacy in this country, and that's all I can tell you. Yeah. Thanks.
What are you going to do about the border and the fentanyl and the sex trafficking and all that, please?
All right, let me answer that one question about the border. Oh, I visited the border, and I spent days there talking to people. And the good news is it's solvable. The bad news is what's happening there right now is insane. There's 10,000 people coming across a day. I watched, when I was there, I went between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning to a gap in the wall at Yuma. It's a gap that should have been sealed. It was about to be sealed. Metal is sitting on the ground right next to it. And when the Biden administration came in, they ordered them not to construct it. It's really crazy. Oh, I watched 300 people come across. They were arriving 55 at a time in buses owned by the Mexican drug cartel, in big, shiny white buses. They all knew exactly what would happen because the cartels are advertising all over the world, on TikTok, on YouTube, and telling people, you send us 10,000 or 15,000. and we'll get you across the border. And they knew they get the first 110 that came across were young men from West Africa. And I did not talk to them because the Border Patrol was processing them. But the second two buses that came, the third and fourth bus that came across were people from, I talked to every one of them. They were from Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Tibet, Nepal, and there were only two families the whole night that were from Latin America, one from Peru, one from Colombia. They were also the only one that told me they had asylum claims. They were fleeing from drug cartels, and were scared for their lives. So they have a legitimate claim. All the other ones said, I'm here to work. So they don't have any legitimate claim to cross that border. And they have to, if they want that, they have to come in the legal way. And I'm for, by the way, wide gates that make it much easier to come in, get citizenship, make sure we have the workforce we need. But I'm not for, just letting the cartels run our immigration policy. There's 7 million people, and all of the sort of liberal Democrats, and I consider myself a liberal Democrat, but liberal Democrats who think they're doing a humanitarian favor for people, it is exactly the opposite. Everybody we talked to had been exploited, extorted. Some of them had been raped. Some of them, the Peruvian family was robbed of everything, a lifetime saving, and beaten. I went to a rape center that the people of Yuma built. These very kind Americans had built to treat the huge numbers of women and children who are raped right before they come across. There's a tree that we could see from the fence that they call the rape tree, where the cartels extract the final payment. And it's the most horrific thing that I've ever seen. The people of Yuma were so kind, but they're being crushed by this. And I spent a day at the hospital. The hospital spent $27 million unreimbursed last year treating migrants that nobody's going to pay for. The local people are having to pay for that in their, and then at one point the hospital administrator told me at 32 of the 35 beds on the maternity ward were occupied by migrant women having babies, and they had to turn away local women who had appointments for, to induce their pregnancy for C-sections, etc. So, and this is happening all over our country. Across, they're fingerprinted. If they don't have a criminal record, they're brought to the Yuma airport, and they're put on a plane to any destination they want in our country. Any destination they want, and if they don't have the money to pay for the ticket, the Border Patrol buys a ticket and then FEMA reimburses them. So you and I are paying for those tickets to them fly anywhere in our country. 7 million have come across in 3 years. During that period, only 3.1 legal immigrants. 3.1 million legal immigrants. So they double. The cartels are bringing two times with illegal immigration as the United States, and it's crushing our social service system. There's 110,000 who've landed in New York. They're sleeping on the streets. When they come across, they're given a trial date at the asylum courts 7 years in the future. And they're here for 7 years. They have no legal status, so they can't legally work. So they're preyed upon by unscrupulous employers who are giving them, 7, 6, 7, 8, 10 bucks an hour to work on construction sites in New York or to do other jobs. And meanwhile, the guys who are the construction, the companies that knowingly hire these migrants are bidding for the same jobs as the union shop. So they're underbidding them, by 20 or 30%. And you're rewarding the worst employers. And now you pay them 10 bucks an hour, you can't get off the street for 10 bucks an hour. So they're still living on the sidewalks. There's now encampments that they're putting New York has spent $1.1 billion this year putting people in hotels. When the winter comes and they can freeze to death, it's going to get much worse. Right now, they're putting them on encampments in Randall's Island, which are the playing fields for New York public schools. So these kids, the kids in New York, who were, we just destroyed this generation during COVID. What we did to them during COVID is inexcusable. But, a lot of these kids weren't allowed to play. New York City school children weren't allowed to play sports for 2 years, 2.5 years. And a lot of them were scholarship track, so their whole lives are now, messed with. And now they can't play sports because there's migrants camped on the field. Eric Adams, who originally said New York is a sanctuary city, is now saying we need $12.5 billion or New York is dead. So it's not a good idea. This lady talked about Cesar Chavez. My father was very, very close to Cesar, and I worked with Cesar Chavez during the last 2 decades of his life, mainly on pesticide issues which disproportionately harm Hispanic farm workers. I was privileged that his family asked me to be a pallbearer when he died in 1993. So, but Cesar had 2 issues during that last 2 decades of his life. One was pesticides, and the other was the border. He wanted the border closed because he understood that all of the migrants coming across were dampening his capacity to leverage good, conditions and pay for his workers. And, and the fact that, my party has forgotten those values and is now twisting it in a way that, if you think that illegal immigration, if you think the border shouldn't be wide open to 10,000 immigrants a day, that you're a racist or you're a, xenophobe. That's not right. I mean, anybody who understands the humanitarian crisis that this policy has caused would be, should be angry about it. So let me just tell you one thing. You can shut it down overnight. You can, and I will do that. The main thing is, the big thing that everybody said, you need to have adequate asylum judges so that you can adjudicate the cases before anybody crosses the border. Once they step a foot onto U.S. land, they have a right to be here until they're fully adjudicated. So you have to do it on the other side of the border, and that's what they used to do, and have enough asylum so you can do it right then and there. And 99.99999% of those people will be turned away immediately because they don't have, they'll stop coming, which ends the crisis and the hazards to them of, what happens to their kids when they walk from, from Nicaragua or from Mexicali or whatever. The other thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to say this because this is sort of an elegant solution that solves a whole lot of problems. The day I get into office, I'm going to order at the State Department waive the fee for passport cards to any American who says they can't afford them. So passport cards are issued, which is a passport, but it's just a card. It's a government-issued photo ID that serves a passport if you want to go to Canada or Mexico. You don't need the whole book. It's a card. And it has your picture on it. It does not keep your vaccine information, your health information. And it's not mandatory. So I'm going to make it so they're easily accessible at every post office. Right now, you get them at the post office. Anybody can walk into their local post office and get one of these cards. And then it shows that they're an American citizen. If you don't have, a lot of people, Democrats worry because a lot of their constituents don't have photo IDs. If you're black, you live in an urban area, high numbers never get a driver's license. High numbers of elderly have lost their driver's license. High numbers of students don't have license. So when they hear Republicans say, we want photo ID at the voting booth, what they're thinking is, oh, then most of my constituents, or a large part of my constituents, won't be able to vote. So this solves this problem. Because now everybody can vote and everybody can show an ID. And I have, this idea now has the support of Al Sharpton, of Andrew Young, of all the top civil rights leaders. In fact, a group of them went to President Biden about a month ago and begged him to do this. And they said, we can drop all our objections to requiring voting ID at the voting booth if we do this, if we have this available. And President Biden wouldn't do it. So, but here's the other problem that's solving it. Because right now, if you're an employer, you're not allowed to hire an illegal alien. But the only thing you're required to do is to ask for their Social Security card. Social Security card has no picture on it.
Right.
They're easily forged. They're passed from hand to hand. And all the employers know this guy is not, he doesn't have a driver's license. We know he's not, you know, he's a young man with no driver's license. Of course, he is, he's not legal. They know it. But all they have to do is check the box, and they know they won't be prosecuted. Now we change that. We say, you cannot hire anybody in this country till they show you a passport ID. And that overnight, the border will dry out. Because all of those people are coming for jobs. If you put a single employer in jail for hiring an illegal alien, it all ends overnight, and the border dries up, and we do it in a way that Republicans and Democrats can agree to. Anyway, thank you all again very much.